She chose the first car that stopped, but when the window rolled down, she realized help had a face the entire city feared. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe. The rain had turned the street into a mirror of broken light. Neon signs bled color into puddles. Tires hissed past like whispered threats. Somewhere behind her, footsteps splashed too close, too steady, not panicked like hers. Purposeful. Hunting. She didn't dare look back again. Her lungs burned, every breath scraping her throat raw as she ran. Her shoes slipped on wet pavement, ankles screaming as she caught herself against a brick wall and pushed forward again. The alley spat her out onto a wider street, empty, late, dangerous in the way only quiet cities could be. Cars passed, but not one slowed. She raised her arm, waving, screaming, but the sound dissolved into rain and distance. Her phone was gone. Her bag was gone. Everything she owned had been left behind in a place she would never return to. The footsteps grew louder. She made a decision that wasn't really a decision at all. A black car idled at the curb, engine low and patient. Its windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. It didn't look safe. It didn't look friendly. It looked expensive. Untouchable. The kind of car people didn't knock on unless they wanted trouble. She didn't have time to think. She ran to it and slammed her palm against the rear passenger window, the sound sharp and desperate, echoing too loudly in the empty street. "Please," she cried, the word torn from somewhere deep and broken. "Please, help me." The window rolled down, smooth, silent, controlled. And the man inside lifted his gaze. Her breath caught so hard it hurt. She knew that face. Everyone did. Sharp lines, cold eyes, a stillness that didn't belong to ordinary men. He sat back in the leather seat like the city itself bent around him, one arm resting casually, fingers loose, relaxed. Too relaxed for someone awake at this hour in this part of town. The devil of the city. The name hit her like ice water. Her stomach dropped. Her hand fell from the glass as if burned. This was worse. Worse than the men chasing her. Worse than the alley she'd fled. Worse than the dark she'd thought she could outrun. She had knocked on the wrong car. His eyes moved over her in one slow sweep. Bare feet soaked and bleeding. Torn jacket hanging off one shoulder. Hair plastered to her face. The way she stood angled, already half prepared to bolt again. He didn't ask her name. He didn't ask what she wanted. He looked past her, down the street. She followed his gaze without meaning to, and saw them. 3 figures at the far end of the block. Not running anymore. No need. They knew where she was now. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Please," she whispered again, but this time it wasn't hope in her voice. It was terror. "I didn't know it was you. I'll go, I swear." "Get in," he said. 2 words, calm, flat, not raised, not rushed. She stared at him, rain dripping from her chin. I can't," she said. "I didn't mean to." "You can," he interrupted, finally looking at her again. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "Or you can keep running, but they're closer than you think." The men behind her laughed softly, the sound carrying through the rain like a promise. She hesitated for half a second. Then the rear door unlocked with a quiet click. That sound, small, mechanical, changed everything. She dove inside just as a hand lunged for her arm. The door slammed shut, sealing her into warmth and leather and the faint scent of expensive cologne and gun oil. The car pulled away smoothly, tires cutting through water without urgency, as if nothing extraordinary had happened at all. She curled in on herself on the seat, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. Her hands were numb. Her mind screamed at her that this was a mistake, that she had traded one danger for something far worse. He didn't look at her as the city slid past outside. "You're bleeding," he said calmly. She laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. "That's what you noticed?" "Yes." Silence fell between them, thick and charged. Finally, she whispered the truth she hadn't meant to say out loud. They won't stop. That was when he turned his head fully toward her, and for the first time, something in his expression shifted, not to kindness, not to mercy, but to recognition. No, he said quietly. They won't. The rain kept falling, and somewhere deep inside her, she realized with a sick, trembling clarity, she hadn't knocked on the wrong car. She had knocked on the only one that would dare stop. The car moved through the city like it owned the night. Rain slid in slow, steady lines down the windows, blurring the streets into streaks of light and shadow. Inside Sai's sight, the silence was heavy, deliberate. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, but watchful. He didn't speak. That unsettled her more than shouting ever could have. She sat rigid on the leather seat, knees drawn in, arms wrapped around herself as if holding her body together required constant effort. Every few seconds her chest hitched, breath catching before she forced it back into something that resembled control. She stared at the floor, afraid that if she met his eyes again, something final would happen. She expected questions. Who are you? What did you do? Who's chasing you?
None came.
Instead, she felt his attention the way prey feels a predator's gaze, precise, consuming, impossible to escape. He watched everything. The way her right hand shook slightly more than the left, the shallow breaths that never quite filled her lungs, the way she angled her body toward the door, as if mapping escape routes even now. The blood seeping through the thin fabric at her ankle, diluted pink by rainwater. The bruising already darkening beneath her sleeve, half hidden, half forgotten. He saw the details people missed. Not the obvious fear, anyone could see that, but the trained fear. The kind learned through repetition, through consequences. You're not panicking, he said at last. The sound of his voice made her flinch despite herself. I am, she whispered. He shook his head once, slow. You're controlling it. That means this isn't the first time. Her fingers curled tighter into her jacket. Silence again. The car stopped at a red light. Neon reflected across his face, revealing sharp planes and an expression carved from restraint. He looked ahead, not at her, as if giving her the illusion of space. Breathe, he said, slower. She didn't realize she was holding her breath until the words hit her. She obeyed without meaning to, drawing in air in a shallow gasp, then another, each one slightly less frantic than the last. He noticed. You protect your ribs when you breathe, he continued, clinical. Left side. Someone taught you to do that, or you learned it the hard way. Her throat tightened. You savor your right leg, he said, but the cut is on the left foot. That means the pain you're avoiding is older than tonight. She closed her eyes. Please, she said quietly. I didn't ask you to save me. I just needed a car. Just 1 minute. That made him look at her again. Really look. You didn't ask, he agreed. You knocked like someone who already knew no one else would stop. The light turned green. The car moved again. Her lips parted, then pressed together. She seemed smaller now, folding inward, as if making herself less visible might still work. Why didn't you ask me why I was running? She asked after a moment, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. Because it doesn't matter, he said. She blinked. It matters to me. It doesn't change what I saw, he replied. You didn't run toward help. You ran away from something specific. You didn't scream until you saw them again. You didn't lie when you thought you were about to be dragged back. She stared at him, stunned. And, he added, you didn't beg until you saw who I was. Her shoulders sagged, defeat settling in. I know what you are, she said. Everyone does. Yes, he said calmly. That's why you stopped shaking when the door locked. She hadn't realized it, but he was right. The tremors had eased. Her fear had shifted, changed shape. I don't feel safe, she said. No, he replied. But you feel contained. The word sent a shiver through her. The car slowed, turning into a quieter street, darker, narrower. She stiffened again, instinct screaming. He noticed. You're counting exits, he said. She let out a broken laugh. Is that bad? No, he said. It means you survived. She finally looked at him then. Not at the devil of the city. Not at the rumors, the headlines, the whispered warnings. At the man. There was something familiar in his eyes. Not kindness, not mercy, recognition. You've seen this before, she said slowly. Yes. In yourself? In others, he corrected, and in what happens when no one listens early enough. Her voice shook. What happens now? He was quiet for a long moment, then evenly. Now I decide whether the people chasing you were brave or stupid. Her heart skipped. That sounds like a threat, she whispered. It is, he said simply, just not to you. Outside Buhtai, the city slid past, unaware that something had shifted, quietly, irrevocably. Inside a moving black car, where a man who measured fear for a living had just found something he recognized far too well. And for the first time since she started running, she realized one terrifying truth. He wasn't asking questions because he already knew what fear looked like. And he knew exactly what it cost. The car slowed, not to stop, but to make a point. The engine dropped into a quiet idle, the kind that suggested patience rather than mercy. Streetlights passed overhead in long, deliberate intervals, illuminating the interior just enough to show the tension etched into her face. She noticed the change immediately. Why are we slowing down? She asked, her voice tight. He didn't answer right away. He glanced at the side mirror, then the rear view, eyes calculating distances, timing, behavior. The headlights behind them were still there, farther back now, keeping pace. They think you're mine, he said calmly. Her stomach twisted. I'm not. No, he agreed. But they don't know that yet. The car rolled to a stop beneath a flickering street lamp. Rain pattered against the roof, softer now, almost polite. Too quiet. The city held its breath. He turned in his seat, finally facing her fully. This is where I give you a choice, he said. Her fingers dug into the leather seat. I already chose, she said. I got in the car. That was instinct, he replied. This is consent. She didn't like the word. It made everything feel heavier. He unlocked the door beside her with a soft click. The sound echoed too loudly in the small space. You can get out, he said evenly. Keep running. Try another street, another door, another stranger. Her eyes darted to the window. The rain, the darkness, the distant shapes moving with too much confidence to be coincidence. Or, he continued, you stay in the car, and whatever happens next happens with me in front of you. She swallowed hard. You're not offering help. No, he said. I'm offering inevitability. The door remained unlocked. She could feel the cold seeping in already, as if the night itself were reaching for her. Her instincts screamed, not to leave, never to leave. What's the price? She asked. He studied her face carefully, as if deciding how much truth she could survive. You don't lie to me, he said. You don't run from me. And when I tell you something is dangerous, you listen the first time. That's it? She asked, disbelief creeping in. He almost smiled. Almost. That's the beginning. She hesitated, her hand hovering inches from the door handle. She imagined stepping out. Imagined the rain soaking her hair again, the pavement slick beneath her feet, the momentary hope of movement before hands closed around her arms. She imagined screaming, no one stopping. She imagined the car driving away without urgency. She pulled her hand back. I'll stay, she said. The door locked instantly. Not loud, not dramatic. Final. Her shoulders slumped as adrenaline drained from her system, leaving her shaky and exhausted. She pressed her forehead briefly to the window, breathing hard. "That was fast," she muttered. "You were already decided," he said. "You just needed permission to stop pretending otherwise." She laughed weakly. "You're very confident for someone who hasn't asked my name."
I don't need it yet.
The car began moving again, smoother than before, slipping back into traffic like a predator returning to the river. She stared ahead, watching the city blur. "If I stayed," she asked quietly, "does that mean they won't follow anymore?" He didn't answer immediately.
No,
he said at last.
it means they'll make a choice.
What choice? Whether they believe I bluff, he replied, or whether they remember what happens to people who mistake patience for weakness. Her chest tightened.
And if they choose wrong?
He glanced at her, eyes cold and steady. Then this stops being a rescue, he said, and becomes a lesson. She hugged herself, shivering, not from cold now, but from the realization settling into her bones. She hadn't chosen safety. She had chosen alignment. And somewhere behind them, in the rain-slicked streets of a city that pretended not to see, the men who had been hunting her were deciding whether the woman they chased was still prey, or had just stepped behind something far worse than them. The car didn't speed up. It didn't need to. Because some offers were only made once, and some doors, once closed, changed the rules of the night forever. She noticed the headlights before he did. Or maybe he noticed them first and waited to see if she would. They appeared at the edge of the rear window like a thought she didn't want to finish. Two white eyes cutting through rain, too steady, too measured. Not speeding, not falling back. Just there. Her spine went rigid. "They're still here," she said. "Yes," he replied calmly. That calm was wrong. Not dismissive, not careless. Informed. The car continued forward, unhurried, turning onto a broader avenue, where the rain thinned into mist and the city lights spread wide and exposed. This wasn't an escape route. This was a stage. The headlights stayed with them. Then another pair appeared farther back. Then another. 3 cars now. Staggered, maintaining distance. No honking. No sudden moves. No mistakes. Her throat tightened. "They're not chasing," she whispered. "They're following." He glanced in the mirror, then nodded once. "Good," he said. "You see it." Her fingers curled into her sleeves. "See what?" "That this isn't panic," he said. "It's intent." The cars behind them adjusted when he changed lanes, not immediately, but cleanly, one after the other, like pieces in a pattern she was only now beginning to understand. Her pulse roared in her ears. "I thought they were just men," she said. "I thought they were angry, drunk, desperate." "They're none of those things," he said. "Not tonight." The streetlight flickered overhead, briefly illuminating his profile. Sharp jaw, eyes forward, expression carved from control. "These men planned," he continued. "They knew where you'd be. They knew when you'd break cover. They didn't grab you in the alley because they wanted witnesses to think you ran." Her stomach dropped. "They wanted you scared," he said. "Disoriented. Alone enough to make mistakes." She pressed her palm to the window as if the glass could anchor her. "And now?" she asked. "And now," he said, "they're reassessing." The car behind them edged closer. Not aggressively, confidently. She could see silhouettes now, heads turned toward her side of the car. Watching. Her voice shook. "They don't care who you are." "That's not true," he said. "They care very much." He slowed slightly. The car behind them slowed too. "They're waiting for confirmation," he said. "They want to know if I'll acknowledge them." "And will you?" "No." He took the next turn sharply, too sharply for a casual driver. Tires hissed. The city narrowed again, buildings leaning in close, shadows thickening. The first car followed. The second hesitated, then followed. The third split off, circling. She gasped. They're flanking us.
Yes.
You sound like you expected this. I hoped, he said. It's easier when enemies are predictable. The street ahead dead-ended into a loading zone lit by a single broken lamp. Trash bins, graffiti, no traffic, no witnesses. Her breath came fast. You're stopping?
Yes.
The car rolled to a smooth halt. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Why would you stop? Because running would tell them you still think this is a chase, he said. It isn't. The headlights behind them stopped too. All three cars, engines idling, doors still closed. The rain softened into a hush, as if even the night wanted to hear what happened next. She grabbed his arm without thinking.
Please, don't let them take me.
He looked at her hand on his sleeve, then up at her face. They won't, he said. Not anymore. One of the cars behind them flashed its lights once. A signal. She felt it then, not fear, not panic, but the cold, suffocating realization settling deep in her chest. This wasn't random violence. This was a message. They're not here for me, she whispered. He met her eyes. No, he said. They're here because you knocked on my window. Her blood went cold. They want to see what I do, he continued. They want to know whether I protect what enters my space, or whether I let it be taken to prove I'm still manageable. Manageable? The word felt obscene. A door opened behind them, then another. Men stepped out into the rain. Calm, deliberate. No weapons visible. No rush. Professionals. Her body shook. He reached into the console and removed his phone, not in a hurry, not with drama. He typed a single message and sent it. Stay seated, he told her. Whatever happens next, do not open your door. What are you going to do? She asked, voice breaking. He opened his own door, rain immediately soaking his coat. I'm going to answer a question they've been asking since you got in my car, he said. He stepped out, standing between her and the men approaching, tall and utterly still. The city held its breath, and she understood then, with terrifying clarity. The men who had been hunting her were no longer deciding whether to take her. They were deciding whether tonight was the night they challenged the devil of the city. And from the way he stood in the rain, unarmed and unflinching, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next would not end quietly. He didn't flinch when the men stepped closer. Not when boots splashed through shallow puddles. Not when one of them smiled like this was already decided. Not even when the circle tightened, subtle and practiced. He stood with his hands at his sides, rain running down his hair and collar, eyes steady and empty of doubt. Inside the car, she watched through the windshield, heart hammering so hard she was sure it would give her away. She pressed her palms flat against her thighs to stop them from shaking. One of the men spoke first. His voice was polite, respectful. That made it worse. You picked up something that doesn't belong to you, the man said. We're here to collect it. He didn't answer. Silence stretched, thick and deliberate. A test. The man smiled wider. No need to make this difficult. We're professionals. We can finish this quietly. That was when she realized something else. They weren't looking at him with hatred. They were looking at him with expectation, as if this were a ritual they'd all rehearsed. Her throat tightened. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't stay quiet anymore. No, she whispered, then louder, panic cracking her voice as she leaned forward. Please, this isn't his fault. They're after me because of... She stopped herself too late, because the name was already out.
Because of Vasily.
The rain seemed to stop, not literally, but something in the air changed, pressure dropping so suddenly her ears rang. He went still, not tense, not defensive. Frozen. One of the men took a half step back without realizing he'd done it. The smile on the leader's face vanished. Inside the car, her stomach dropped through the floor. She hadn't meant to say it. The name had slipped out the way truth sometimes did, when fear burned away caution. She clapped a hand over her mouth, horror flooding in.
"Oh, God,"
she whispered.
"I'm sorry. I didn't know."
He turned his head slowly, just enough to look at her through the open driver's side door. For the first time since she'd knocked on his window, there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not anger, memory.
"You know that name,"
he said quietly. The men shifted again. One of them swore under his breath. She nodded, tears burning.
"I didn't know who he was."
Not really.
"I only knew he paid well. He said I was just a courier,
that I'd never meet him,
that if I asked questions—"
Her voice broke. I tried to walk away. He wouldn't let me. The leader cleared his throat, unease bleeding through his practiced calm.
"This doesn't concern you," he said quickly. "Whatever history you think you have, that's old business."
He laughed once. It was a terrible sound. Soft, almost amused. "Old business doesn't follow women through alleys," he said. "It doesn't leave bruises on their arms, and it doesn't send dogs after them unless someone broke a promise." The rain started again, harder now, drumming against metal and skin.
She stared at him, realization crashing over her in waves.
"You knew him," she whispered.
"I buried him," he replied.
The words landed like gunfire. One of the men took another step back. Another reached instinctively toward his jacket, then stopped himself. "He owed me," he continued, voice even. "Blood for blood. And when I paid that debt, I was told the account was closed." The leader swallowed.
"It was,"
he said too fast.
This is someone else. A fragment. An echo."
"No," he said.
"This is interest."
She hugged herself, guilt and terror twisting together in her chest.
"I didn't know,"
she said again, helpless.
"I swear, if I had—"
"I know," he interrupted, without looking at her.
"Because if you had, you wouldn't have been running. You would have been hiding.
There's a difference." He stepped forward just one pace. The men stiffened.
"You used her because you thought my world had moved on," he said. "You thought the city had forgotten what that name costs."
The leader's jaw tightened.
"You don't want this war."
He tilted his head slightly. "You brought it to my door," he said. "She just knocked on the window." Silence fell again, heavier than before. Inside the car, she felt it then, the shift. The danger hadn't ended. It had escalated. And the name she should never have said hadn't condemned her. It had sealed something far older, far darker. A debt written in blood. And now, finally, being collected. The place he took her didn't announce itself. There were no gates, no guards visible from the street, no dramatic arrival. Just an unremarkable stretch of city that most people passed without noticing. An old industrial block half forgotten by progress, where warehouses squatted low and quiet like animals that knew better than to draw attention. The car slipped into a narrow side entrance and disappeared. Only then did she realize how deliberate everything had been. The door closed behind them with a sound that was final, without being loud. The engine cut. Silence followed, not empty silence, but the kind layered with unseen systems, humming just out of reach. She stayed still, heart racing, as he stepped out first and held the door open for her.
"Come,"
he said. She hesitated, not because she thought she could run, but because every instinct screamed that stepping out of this car meant crossing into a world she could never fully leave. She stepped out anyway. Inside, the air was warmer, drier. The smell wasn't antiseptic or luxurious. It was neutral, controlled. Concrete polished smooth. Soft lighting placed exactly where it needed to be, and nowhere else. People were there, though none stared. Men and women moved through the space with purpose, acknowledging him with slight nods, brief pauses. No one asked questions. No one looked surprised to see her soaked, bruised, shaking beside him. And that frightened her more than hostility ever could have. "You live here?" she asked quietly.
"No," he replied. "I rule from here."
The difference mattered. He guided her through a series of corridors, each one subtly different until they reached a room that felt human. A couch, a low table, a towel folded neatly on the armrest, a glass of water already waiting. She stared at it. "Sit," he said, gentler now. She sank onto the couch, muscles finally giving up the fight. He handed her the towel without ceremony. She took it with trembling hands, pressing it to her face. Her hair, her neck, proof that warmth still existed. "This place," she said slowly. "They won't come here." "They can't," he corrected. "Not without permission." Her chest tightened. "Yours." "Yes!" She nodded, absorbing the weight of that. A woman entered silently, setting a small medical kit on the table. She glanced at the bruises on the woman's arms, the cut on her ankle, and went to work without a word. Efficient, gentle, unemotional. Protection without sympathy. That, somehow, hurt more than kindness would have. When the woman left, he sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees, hands loosely clasped. "There are rules," he said. "You will learn them." She swallowed. "Rules like what I can say, where I can go." "Yeah." "And if I break them?" He met her gaze unflinching. "Then you put everyone here at risk, including yourself." The honesty was brutal, appreciated. "What's the price?" she asked again. He considered her carefully. "You don't use my name lightly," he said. "You don't leave without telling someone. You don't lie. And you don't assume protection means freedom." Her lips parted. "So I'm trapped?" "No," he said. "You're sheltered." She let out a shaky breath. "That sounds like the same thing." He leaned back slightly. "It is, until you understand why it exists." She stared at the floor, then back up at him. "And if I decide I don't want this?" "You can leave," he said. "Tonight, if you want." She blinked. "Just like that?" "Yes." "But they'll find me." "Yes." Silence settled between them. She hugged the towel tighter around herself. "Then staying isn't really a choice." He didn't deny it. "Neither was knocking on my window," he said. "Life doesn't offer clean options when fear is involved." She nodded slowly. Outside, the city continued as if nothing had changed. People slept. People drank. People laughed. Somewhere, men who had hunted her were discovering doors they could no longer open. She looked up at him, eyes steady now, despite the exhaustion. "What happens next?" she asked. He stood. "Next," he said, "you rest. Tomorrow we decide who survives what you ran from." Her heart skipped. "And me?" He paused at the door, glancing back at her. "You already survived," he said. "Now you learn what that costs." The door closed softly behind him. She sat alone in a place built on fear, wrapped in warmth she hadn't earned, and protection she hadn't asked for, knowing with chilling certainty that nothing about her life would ever be small again. Because shelters like this didn't exist for kindness. They existed for wars, and she was now standing at the center of one. She slept for 4 hours. Not the deep, forgiving kind of sleep people talked about wistfully, but the kind born of exhaustion so complete the body shut down despite the mind's protests. When she woke, it was to soft light and the unfamiliar certainty that no one was standing over her. That alone made her chest ache. She sat up slowly on the couch, the towel now replaced with clean clothes folded neatly beside her. Someone had tended to her while she slept. Someone had decided she was worth the effort. The thought was unsettling. He arrived without sound. No footsteps, no announcement. One moment the room was empty. The next, he stood near the doorway, jacket gone, sleeves rolled, the city's rain still clinging to his hair. "You're awake," he said. She nodded, fingers curling into the fabric of the borrowed sweater. "I don't know how long I slept." "Long enough," he replied. "Do you want water or coffee?" "Water," she said quickly. Her throat felt raw, scraped hollow by words she hadn't said yet. He handed her a glass and sat across from her again, same posture as before, grounded, patient. He wasn't rushing her. That was worse than pressure. "I told you there would be rules," he said. "Here's one more. You don't keep secrets that can kill people in my house." Her hands tightened around the glass. "I know," she said. I didn't know how to start." He waited. She took a breath that shook on the way in. "I wasn't running because they wanted me," she began. "Not exactly." She stared at the water as if it could rearrange itself into courage. "I was running because I was supposed to disappear," she said. "And when I didn't, they decided to erase me instead." He didn't interrupt. "I worked for a logistics firm," she continued. "Nothing glamorous. Shipping manifests, customs entries. Numbers no one reads because they're too boring to be dangerous." She laughed bitterly. "That's why they chose me." His eyes sharpened. "I started seeing discrepancies," she said. "Routes that didn't make sense. Containers cleared without inspection. Charities listed as recipients that didn't exist. And then, names." Her voice dropped. "Names that don't show up on public records. Shell companies layered so deep, you'd have to know where to cut to find anything real." She finally looked up at him. "I didn't know who they belonged to at first. Only that the money moved upward, always upward. Politicians, judges, people who smile on television and talk about law and order." The glass trembled in her hands. "I told my supervisor," she said. "He told me to stop looking. I didn't." A muscle in his jaw tightened. "They noticed," she went on. "Not right away. They're careful. They let me see just enough to trap myself." She swallowed hard. "They gave me an offer, a promotion, silence, a future. All I had to do was sign off on a shipment that didn't exist." "And you didn't," he said. "No," she whispered. "I copied everything, drives, emails, ledger notes. I sent some of it to a reporter. I kept the rest." "Where?" he asked. She hesitated, then reached into the backpack she'd carried into the shelter and pulled out a small, battered notebook. She placed it on the table between them like a confession. "Codes," she said. "Locations, names I couldn't write digitally without triggering alerts. It's not everything, but it's enough to ruin them." He didn't touch it yet. "That's why they chased you," he said. "Yes," she replied. "But that's not why I ran into the street." She closed her eyes. "They took my sister," she said. "Not officially. No paperwork. Just a core that didn't stop. A phone that went dead." Her voice broke. "She has a son. 6 years old. And when they took her, they told me if I didn't disappear quietly, he would be next." Silence slammed down between them. "I didn't run to save myself," she said. "I ran because if I stayed visible, if I made noise, they'd have to keep him alive." He leaned back slowly, breath measured. "You became leverage," he said. "Yes," she whispered, "and now so has he." His gaze finally dropped to the notebook. "You understand what this means," he said. "Yes," she said. "That's why I knocked on your window." He looked up sharply. "You knew who I was," he said. "I knew who could make them hesitate," she replied. "I knew who had enemies big enough that my secret might matter." A beat passed. "And if I decide this ends quietly?" he asked. She shook her head. "It can't. Not anymore. Too many people know I exist." He exhaled slowly, the weight of it settling into his shoulders. "What you're carrying," he said, "could unseat men who believe themselves untouchable." She nodded. "I know. And it will cost," he continued. "Not just money. Not just blood." She met his eyes. "I already paid," she said. "I just don't want my nephew to be the next installment." He stared at her for a long moment, then finally reached out and took the notebook. "Then this stops being about shelter," he said quietly, "and starts being about consequence." Her chest tightened. "Does that mean you'll help?" He stood, tucking the notebook under his arm. "It means," he said, "you didn't run far enough." Her heart skipped. "But you knocked on the right window." And for the first time since she began running, she believed him. He didn't decide in a dramatic moment. There was no single sentence, no clenched fist on a table, no declaration of war spoken aloud. Those kinds of decisions were for men who wanted to be seen making them. He decided the way he always did, quietly, completely. The city didn't know it yet, but the balance shifted the moment he left that room with her notebook under his arm. He walked through corridors that responded to him without question. Doors opened, conversations stopped. People straightened, not out of fear alone, but recognition. Something had changed. They could feel it the way animals sensed weather. Luca fell into step beside him without being called. "You're moving early," Luca said. "We weren't scheduled." "Cancel everything," he replied. "Meetings, dinners, negotiations." Luca frowned slightly. "All of them?" "Yes." They reached his office. He didn't sit. He placed the notebook on the desk and opened it, scanning the pages not like a man searching for truth, but like a man confirming what he already suspected. Names surfaced. Not street names. Not small players. These were architects, financiers, men who hid behind institutions and believed themselves insulated by legitimacy. Men who shook hands in daylight and ordered disappearances after dark. Luca read over his shoulder, breath slowing. "This reaches higher than I thought," he said carefully. "That's the point," he replied. "They thought height made them untouchable." Luca hesitated. "If you move against this, it won't stay quiet." "No," he agreed. "It won't." "Then why—" He closed the notebook. "Because if I don't," he said, "they win without firing another shot." Luca understood then. His jaw tightened. "She's leverage," Luca said. "To both sides." "She's proof," he corrected. "And letting proof die is how empires rot." Luca studied him. "This isn't mercy." "No," he said. "It's refusal. Refusal to kneel. Refusal to pretend neutrality existed when predators dressed themselves as lawmakers. Refusal to let men like Vasily, ghosts who should have stayed buried, write the rules again." He turned. "Bring me everyone who's ever moved money through those channels," he ordered. "Quietly. I want patterns before panic." "And the girl?" Luca asked. He paused. "Move her nephew tonight," he said. "No warning, no paper trail. Somewhere warm, somewhere boring. Somewhere alive." Luca nodded once. No questions. When he returned to her, she was standing by the window, staring out at a skyline that didn't know it was about to be rearranged. She turned when she heard him. "You decided," she said. "Yes." Her shoulders squared. "Which side?" He didn't hesitate. "The side that doesn't pretend innocence while profiting from fear." Her throat bobbed. "That sounds expensive." "It is," he said. "In ways people like me measure." She swallowed. "And if I hadn't knocked on your window?" He considered that. "Someone else would have," he said. "Eventually. But they wouldn't have survived long enough to matter." She flinched, not at the threat, but at the truth. "You're not doing this for me," she said. "No," he replied. "I'm doing it because if I let them erase you, they'll believe the city belongs to them again." "And does it?" A corner of his mouth twitched, not a smile. Something colder. "No," he said. "It never did." She looked at him then, really looked, at the weight in his posture, the inevitability in his calm. "What happens to me?" she asked. "You stay alive," he said, "and you learn to live with the consequences of being right in a city that prefers obedience." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I never wanted this." "Neither did I," he replied. "But some wars choose you." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "They will come," he said. "Not loud, not fast. They'll try to peel this apart piece by piece. You will be tempted to disappear again." She nodded. "Don't," he said.
That's how they win.
She held his gaze. And if they come for me directly?
Then they come through me, he said. And no one does that twice.
Outside, the city lights flickered as if uncertain. Inside, a man the city called its devil had chosen a side. Not out of kindness, not out of pity, but because power meant nothing if it bent to cowards. And somewhere far above the streets, men who believed themselves untouchable felt the first tremor of something they had forgotten to fear. Consequences. The city didn't erupt. It hushed. That was how people who paid attention knew something was wrong. The clubs closed earlier than usual. Couriers rerouted without explanation. Men who were always seen suddenly weren't. Phones rang and stopped ringing altogether. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Meetings were postponed with vague excuses that no one believed. The devil had moved. No announcement followed. No body left in the street as punctuation. No rumor planted deliberately. He didn't need noise. Noise was for those who needed to convince others they mattered. He let absence do the talking. She noticed it first when the building felt emptier. Not fewer people, those were still there, but fewer edges. Fewer sharp glances. Fewer whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. The fear around her shifted shape, no longer predatory, no longer curious. Now it was cautious. She stood at a window overlooking a side street she'd been told never to walk alone at night. Tonight, it was empty. No dealers. No watchers leaning against brick walls. No idling cars. "Is this because of me?" she asked quietly. He stood a few feet behind her, reading a message on his phone that required no reply. "Yes," he said. Her chest tightened. "I didn't want—"
"I know," he interrupted calmly. "That's why it works."
He slipped the phone back into his pocket. "They're recalculating," he continued. "Every alliance they thought was stable is being tested." "By you?"
"By the idea that I chose," he said. "Power doesn't frighten people. Direction does."
She turned toward him. "They know you're protecting me."
"They know I claimed the problem," he corrected. "There's a difference."
She shivered. "That sounds dangerous."
"It is," he said. "For them."
Across the city, men who had spent decades building influence through distance suddenly found doors closed, accounts frozen under scrutiny that arrived too fast to be coincidence. Investigations reopened by people who had once declined to look. It wasn't obvious. It was surgical. One judge canceled a weekend trip. One donor withdrew funding. One fixer stopped answering calls. And in the spaces between those small disruptions, panic grew. Because this wasn't chaos. It was order moving against them. Luca appeared in the doorway later that night, face grim but controlled.
"They're scrambling," he said. "Vasile's old network is bleeding contacts. No one wants to be the last man standing near this."
"Good," he replied.
"They're also spreading a story," Luca added. "That you've gone soft. That you're distracted."
He almost smiled. "Let them," he said. "Men make mistakes when they believe myths." She listened from the couch, knees drawn up, absorbing the truth settling around her like fog. "I didn't think the city would care," she said softly. "About one woman, one notebook." "It doesn't," he said. "It cares that the rules changed." She looked at him. "And what are the new rules?" He met her gaze. "That protection is visible," he said. "That leverage doesn't always disappear. And that the old habit of silencing inconvenient people has consequences." Outside, sirens wailed, distant, controlled. Not chaos. Cleanup. The streets remained quiet. Too quiet. That was the other sign. Predators went still when something bigger entered their territory. She hugged her arms around herself. "I feel like I broke something." "You revealed it," he corrected. "It was already broken." She hesitated. "What if they come for me anyway?" "They won't," he said. "You sound certain." "I am," he replied. "Because they're afraid of the wrong thing now." She frowned. What do you mean?
They're afraid of me, he said, and fear makes people predictable. He walked to the window beside her, looking out over a city that had bent without realizing it. Tomorrow, he continued, someone will try to make peace. Offer me a compromise. A quiet end.
And will you take it? She asked.
He shook his head. No, he said, because silence is how this started. She closed her eyes, a weight lifting even as another settled in its place. The city had turned, not in her favor, in his, and by extension, hers. The devil had taken something under his protection, and the city, wise enough to remember old lessons, had decided not to ask what that protection cost, only what it meant. The danger didn't end with a sound. It didn't finish in a courtroom or with sirens screaming through the night. There was no single moment she could point to and say, this is when it was over. Instead, it thinned, quietly, like fog lifting from a city that had forgotten what sunlight felt like. One morning she woke up and realized she hadn't checked the locks 3 times before sleeping. Another day passed without her flinching at footsteps behind her. Then a week went by without anyone watching her through reflective glass. That was when she understood. It was over. She stood by the same window she'd stared out of for weeks, the city spread below her in ordinary motion, vendors shouting, buses groaning to a stop, people arguing over nothing and everything. Life, messy and loud and unaware of how close it had come to losing its shape. Behind her, he sat at the table, coffee untouched, reading through reports that now ended with conclusions instead of warnings. They won't try again, he said without looking up. She believed him, not because of faith, because of pattern. The men who had hunted her were gone. Some vanished into obscurity, others swallowed by investigations they couldn't buy their way out of fast enough. The name that had once chased her through alleys now existed only in sealed files and unfinished sentences. She turned from the window. I keep thinking about that night, she said, about how close I was to passing your car without knocking. He set the papers down, studying her expression. And? He asked. And how stupid it was, she said softly. I didn't even look. I was desperate. I was terrified. I could have knocked on anyone's window. But you didn't, he replied. She nodded. I think I knew. Not consciously, but something in me recognized that your car stopped when it didn't have to. He leaned back slightly. Most people keep moving. Yes, she said. You didn't. She crossed the room and sat opposite him, hands folded now not in fear, but habit. I've been trying to decide how I feel about that, she admitted. About you. He waited. You're not kind, she said. Not in the way stories make heroes kind. No, he agreed. But you listened, she continued. And you didn't turn away. You didn't ask what it would cost you first. His gaze sharpened. I knew what it would cost. She met his eyes. And you paid it anyway. Silence settled between them, not heavy, not tense, earned. Do you regret it? She asked. He considered the question carefully. No, he said, but I wouldn't do it again for just anyone. She smiled faintly. I wouldn't knock again for just anyone either. They shared the smallest breath of laughter, quiet, unguarded. She stood and reached into her bag, pulling out the notebook. It was thinner now, empty of danger, a relic. I don't need this anymore, she said. No, he agreed. You don't. She hesitated, then placed it on the table anyway. Keep it, she said, as proof that sometimes the city gets it wrong about you. He raised an eyebrow. You think the city cares? No, she said, but I do. He accepted it without comment. At the door, she paused, hand on the handle. If that night happened again, she said, not turning around, if I was running, if everything was falling apart, I'd knock again. I know, he said. And you'd stop? She asked. His voice was steady, certain. Yes. She opened the door and stepped into the world. No longer hunted, no longer hidden. Outside, the street was bright, loud, ordinary. But as she walked away, she glanced once over her shoulder, toward the place where a black car had once idled in the rain. She hadn't knocked on the wrong window. She had knocked on the only one that would stop. And that had changed everything.